Hello again. I'm finally back to do the second talk on my book. This time I called it the episode 1, and I'd like to talk about the Finnish people who have been in this work and about myself, as I'm also a Finn. In the early times in Russia, Gurdjieff started his teaching in 1912, and he was joined by a Finn with his wife, Leonie Stjernvalls, and the wife was called Elisabetta Stjernvalls. Leonie Stjernvalls was a well-to-do owner of a spa in the, so to say, Finnish part of Russia at that time, where apparently the interesting meeting that Uspensky tells, where Gurdjieff spoke without saying words directly to his chest, took place. I think the place was actually Terijoki, but I have no evidence about that. That was a famous beach in that part of Russia. Leonid was supporting Gurdjieff from 1914 when he joined in Petrograd, which was the name of the town at that time. Of course it is St. Petersburg, which has been changing names sometimes. It so happened that Leonid's wife, Elisabetta, gave birth to Gurdjieff's child in Tbilisi, which in Russia is called Tiflis, when they were on their way down to Europe. It may seem a little bit strange that Gurdjieff had so many illegitimate children, particularly with his students. I don't know of any others, but it so happened. And one of these children then was Leonid, the son of these two Finnish people, who actually spent some time then with Gurdjieff in Friör, where he also met Paul Beekman Taylor, a friend of mine who is writing a lot on Gurdjieff, interesting books, who was his friend then and who was his friend later. When Finland was at war, helped by Herr Hitler, in the leadership of Marshal Mannerheim, who had his main military education in the Russian army, he was fighting their wars also. But then, having come to Finland at the time of the Second World War, and slightly during that and after that, he was also the 6th president of Finland for a couple of years. When in trouble, Mannerheim could be trusted. It's interesting to find out that Nikolai wanted to help Finland against Russia in the war. So he came to Finland. He was able to get in contact with Marshal Mannerheim and became his assistant and secretary. He was very capable in languages, having learned Russian French and English, probably also German at that time. At least he spoke that very well in his late years. Nikolai was for 5 years helping the Finns to win the war. Whatever he and Marshal Mannerheim did together did not really help in anything else but keep Finland independent, and that we partly have to thank also Gurdjieff's son, Nikolai. After these happenings, Nikolai was given a job at United Nations with the help of Mannerheim, who moved to Switzerland as well, into Montreux, into a very nice place which I've seen from the outside but never visited. By the way, there is in Switzerland a Mannerheim Park in Montreux, and his statue in the park. Now, but we're not talking about Mannerheim, but I am fairly sure that Mannerheim also knew about Mr. Gurdjieff, because surely Nikolai also told him who his father was. Afterwards, Nikolai was then near Geneva, stationed in Vevey, where I was able to contact him a few times. And we spoke on the phone about half a dozen times. We were wanting to meet each other. It was my request, of course. I really would have liked to meet Nikolai, but it didn't turn out. We had already agreed a time and date for our meeting, and then Paul Beekman Taylor told me that Nikolai had died. So it never happened, like it so often happens with people who we really want to meet. Something goes wrong. It is not the first and the last time that happened to me. This brings me back to my military journey, which was slightly different, to say the least. Finland had already been out of the war for over 10 years when I joined the Finnish artillery in the Finnish army, and I was stationed in 2 places where the influence of both the Orthodox Church and Gurdjieff's teaching reached me. First of these was where I was a rookie in Ylämylly, near the town of Joensuu, and we used to have 2 different priests coming to hold sermons outside, mainly in the square outside the barracks. One of them was a Lutheran church and the other one an Orthodox church. The Orthodox church was called the Orthodox priest was called Erkki Piiroinen, who, when he died, was a right reverend, a very respected, was able to speak in a beautiful fashion, and he certainly spoke directly to my heart at this moment. At these moments, I should say, that I was in the army. From there I moved to the lower officers' course in Oulu, which is near the Arctic Circle. Very cold. But it was a very interesting time because that's where I met the name Gurdjieff and Uspensky. a friend of mine called Simo, who became a doctor. He translated some literature like Kafka in his early years. He said, "There's a book you should read, Reijo. It's called The Outsider. It's written by Colin Wilson." And of course, he did not have a clue what he got me into, because I've been in it and I'm not getting out of it all my life since that. I followed it up, and later on, even once, I interviewed Colin Wilson for the Gurdjieff Internet Guide that I was running. Unfortunately, when I started to asking questions about Gurdjieff, he stopped the interview. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I found not I was in the military, but I found the spiritual warfare instead of the real war outside, which was very near at the time I was in the army, because the Russians had put hundreds of tanks on the Finnish border. Our eastern border is fairly long, it is over 1,000 kilometers long, and they were lining up, apparently preparing for a visit. So, as my little story tells you, anything can happen. In the military I found the Orthodox Church, and I found Gurdjieff's teaching. And I'm very happy about that. How my inner warfare then went on is fairly interesting for me, at least. I was in England, of course. I went there, moved there in 1967, came back in 1971, having been in the Gurdjieff Work for about 4 years. And some years later, actually 6 years later, I was selling fabrics to the Finnish garment industry, mainly from England. And I was traveling quite a lot. And my good friend, Timo, a yoga teacher who had lived in my house in Wimbledon for nearly a year, and he was really a spiritual friend from whom I've learned a lot. I don't know how much he learned from me. But he joined me in these trips on the Finnish countryside, which is a fairly big country, Finland, as things go. So we could drive hundreds of kilometers, taking turns. And once we decided then, okay, we'll go and visit the Valam in English, monastery, which is again very near Ylämyllyä and the town of Joensuu. And we arrived there on a very cold evening, late. It was dark, but there was a lot of snow. And we pulled up there, driving through the fir tree alley that there is still today. That's 100 years old fir trees lining the way, which you can't, I think, drive anymore these days. The new church that they had been building in 1977 was nearly ready, and to save heating costs, the service that was going on when we arrived was carried out in the little winter church, where future Aigumen Panteleimon was holding a service. He made a big impression on me then, with long hair and the monk's clothes. Of course, he was also a monk. One of the first that I've ever seen in my life. And the surroundings and everything was really incredible. From that time on, the teachings of Gurdjieff and the Orthodox Church have gone hand in hand in my life, and they continue to do so. Today I live in a place here which is being established as a monastery for men and women within the Finnish Orthodox Church, with the influence directly from Mount Athos. Thank you for listening. I'll be back more with these sort of episodes or directly reading from my book. Thank you.